It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, folks, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 132, recorded on this day, the last day of October. All Saints Day, would I be right in saying that, Jack? You're much further across these religious festivals than I am.
I think it's All Souls Day, actually.
All Souls Day. Well, that does sound right. And then All Souls, that's right. It's All Saints Day tomorrow, isn't it?
Yes.
And All Souls Day is actually Halloween.
For those people who celebrate it. Right?
For yes, for all those who celebrate it. I have no problem with it. We've got some bags of lollies and chocolates and stuff like that. We may have some kids turn up knocking on the door. It never used to happen when we were kids, and we were great. Any sort of angle we were looking for some free lollies, we would have considered. But the times change. It's not just an American festival. I think people get that wrong. It's bloody big in Ireland. They really go hard on that one. So So what will be happening in Hong Kong on All Souls Day, Jack?
Plenty of Halloween parties, all that sort of stuff. I was in the car park, or in the entrance this morning, and there were lots of kids heading off to school in their Halloween costumes.
Nice.
The little kids and some of the bigger kids. And there will be lots of people badly dressed in Halloween costumes when I go down to join some friends for a post 5 o'clock drink. And I'm pleased to say that things like cultural appropriation and political correctness in dress and all that sort of stuff are completely unknown in Hong Kong. There will be lots of stuff that would draw the ire of say, a United States college.
Yeah, look, I just can't see why people object to it. And I do understand the objection is essentially about the Americanisation of our culture, Jack. But that's really not the case. I mean, Halloween is celebrated throughout the Christian world, or All Souls Day is. Certainly the Roman Christian world, and Halloween itself is very widely observed across that world. And I don't really have a problem with kids having a bit of fun and necking half their body weight in compound chocolate afterwards.
Yeah. I used to always laugh at my friends who would be complaining about the Americanisation of culture, right back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and they'd be sitting there in a pair of sneakers, blue jeans, a T-shirt, while doing so, and having listened to rock and roll into the early hour, rock and roll or black soul to the early hours of the morning, right? And you're saying, well, you're happy with some parts of American culture, but you're not.
Well,
happy
all
with
those clothes, Jack, would have been made in China. So there is that.
But they might have been made in China, but they are absolutely American culture.
Yeah, no, I understand, but and look, probably if they were wearing a pair of Nikes, they would have been made by tiny little children somewhere in Southeast Asia. They got those tiny little hands that just get that stitching done perfectly. All right. The bullshit artist formerly known as Prince Andrew is now a mere mortal like the rest of us, Jack. He's been stripped of his princely title. He's been dispatched to Sandringham and a house there. He's on we don't know, but we don't know the extent of it, but he's on some sort of stipend from his brother, the king.
Well, this is all in the process of happening. I mean, he hasn't been stripped. They've started the process. It's got to go to the Lord Chancellor, etc., etc.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
I see. I knew nothing about this sort of stuff. I just finished writing about it, actually, in a kind of amusing way. But we have discussed the scandals around Andrew and Epstein previously, where we said that really it was sort of the king's job to sort of keep him at arm's length, but close enough that he could still have some form of control over him. But I gather, there are just more and more revelations. There's a prospect of criminal charges, Jack. We sort of might have dismissed them in a previous episode, but what's alleged there is that Andrew has obtained personal details of a woman who committed suicide last year, but Virginia Giuffre, I think is the correct American pronunciation anyway, and including her social security number and things like that, and then passed them on to a police officer who was part of his security detail to, I guess, dig a bit of dirt, Jack.
Yeah, there's it doesn't really amount to much. I mean, when they could charge him with misconduct in public office, which is the thing you charge people with when you can't find anything else to charge them with. But the problem the Royals have got isn't whether he gets charged or convicted or whatever. The problem's bigger. The problem's kind of the survival in its current form of the monarchy,
Yeah.
and that's
I think it's as serious as that too.
That's the principal role of the king, is to protect that, right? That's what he'll want to do, and what his son and heir, his first son and heir, will want to do as well. And that's why this is happening. That they think that Prince Andrew was doing incalculable damage to the royal family, and in a crisis situation, it doesn't matter so much what's gone wrong up till now. It's what you do next that matters. Right?
Well, are we getting to the point where he cuts him adrift and Fergie as well?
Well, he won't cut him adrift because no one else will, or anybody else who supports him will have very poor motives indeed, I would think. But he will. He will look after him in a limited way. And I've got to say, a smarter man than Andrew might think that the chapter of his life that he's been going through is over, and a nice house in Sandringham, plenty of time for golf, a couple of horses to hack around the estate on. He seems to like doing that. Who knows? Maybe there might be the odd discreet jolly to somewhere exotic, for a holiday with his friends, if he's got any, and life wouldn't be too bad. But he's not a smart enough man, I don't think, to think that.
Well, he continues to deny that he has any responsibility.
Yeah,
in this. I mean, he continues to believe himself a victim in all of this. He's been stitched up by God knows who, his victims possibly. And so there is no sense. He really does carry that really ugly gene that runs through the Windsor family, or the House of Windsor. That's what we saw with someone like Edward VIII, that really ugly, bloated entitlement. But for all that, Jackie remains eighth in line to the throne.
Well, they can't change the line of succession.
Well, they can. They did, actually. It used to be all male, and now it's gender is irrelevant. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that would require lining up all the ducks, which means I think in that case they had to get the approval of the Australian government and New Zealand, Canada, all that sort of stuff.
Is that right?
Well. Yeah.
I would have thought it would have gone to the Commons and then the Lords as a minimum.
No, but it's wider than that. I think Julia Gillard was Prime Minister when it happened. What Andrew really needs is to take up the drink, because a bloke that age should have a hobby. Right?
we're hearing stories. I mean, there was another member of the security detail at Buckingham Palace who just talked about what a nightmare he was, just this bloated entitlement. Story about a woman who was practicing her curtsy and then Andrew walked in and she curtsied for him, and she apparently did it in a way that offended him so greatly he ordered her outside to practice further and then come back in and curtsy for him. And this is stuff that belongs in the 18th century.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is not peculiar actually to his immediate family. This is probably has a kind of a wider application around certain parts of the aristocracy. It always happens to the ones who are a bit dim.
Well, I'd go a little bit privileged as well. I mean, all of them are privileged, but it would seem that Andrew could never put a foot wrong as a kid, and that was probably down to his parents and the lack of good parenting. And I mean, what was it? The 2078 lease on the Royal Lodge, Jack. Who worked that out?
Yeah,
it had to be Elizabeth.
I mean, you're right. This is the fruit of privilege, not just the royal family. It's a lovely story they used to tell about Elton John back in the days when he's still doing coke, and they're having lunch on the terrace of a hotel in the south of France, as sometimes happens when the lunch is going on in a seaside place, the wind started to pick up off the water as the afternoon goes on, right? And you're getting a little breeze. So Sir Elton has called the waiter over and asked him to do something about this fucking wind. And one of his lunch companions said, she's finally lost it, about Elton. But so this is what you get when everybody says yes to you. You get this sense of privilege and people lose their grounding in reality.
I think there's a lot more to come, Jack, and they are clearly gunning for him. And I think the pressure on Charles will be, well, I can't keep him on a stipend in a little house in the Sandringham estate. I can't do that now. I've got to do something else, and that might be we just cut him and his grasping wife adrift altogether.
No, I don't think they can go any further because he would be more dangerous without the stipend in the house on Sandringham than he would with it.
No, we'll see. There will come a time, I think, that Charles will have to make a choice. All right, moving on. Copyright, paywalls making $1. Well, this all sort of came to a head during the Defo trial with Jacinta Namatjima Price, and she's being sued by a member of the Central Australian Aboriginal group, Jack. And it transpires that there's a bloke there who is compiling subscriber-based news and then flicking them around to a sort of group of people and then charging them for him. Charging them, and well above the subscriber rates, it must be said. What's going on there, Jack?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, these sort of media services have been around for a long time. You can subscribe to them, and rather than you read the papers, they'll send you.
Well, Apple News is an aggregator, for example. You know?
And I can't remember the name of the first one. Was in Australia, but it was quite successful for a time. You don't have to bother reading the paper; they'll send you an email with the headlines and the bits of stories, the bits that you are normally interested in will be in your email in the morning, right?
Well, Google does that just as a matter of course. So when you look at your Google page, particularly on your phone, it'll come up with a whole list of stories. Some of them are paywalled, and and you'll click on them. It's not as if the paywall has disappeared. What's happened here is this aggregator has grabbed news from behind the paywall, and he's aggregated it send it on to a list of
Yes.
clients, and charges them, well, significant amounts of money, Jack. What did I see? $1,200 here?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, he gets paid $100 a month by more than 100 prominent Australians across the world of politics, business, and academia. He rattled off a bunch of names, including Marcia Langton, who was a significant contributor to the Australian herself for a long time. And I'm sure that there'll be various media organisations taking a fair bit of interest in this, Jack. Well, some of them already have.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, people do this informally with each other. If there's something I really want to read in the Nine press and I can't be bothered going through the hoops of getting behind the paywall, which is still possible with the Nine network, generally speaking. And I know someone who will have read it. I said,
a lot harder now. I've had to subscribe. They did it deliberately to say, well, you only get this many free articles per month. But all you do is clear your cache and you could get into it again.
Yeah.
But now they've made it harder. It was deliberate. It was a deliberate way of sort of, we want to half-arsing their way through a paywall.
Well, for 10 years you could get into just by using the Canberra Times.
It's harder now. Yeah.
A
lot of them are hard.
I mean,
they tell me the Australian or the News Corp one is almost impossible to break. There are various tools that appear on the internet from time to time that allow users to get around the paywall in some cases, but generally speaking, they get shut down pretty quickly.
Yeah, but look, so occasionally I'll get a friend to chop out half an article and send me an email, cut and paste it into an email, and I might do the same with him with the Oz. It's the only sub I pay, but this bloke's doing it commercially.
Yeah, that's the difference, and
on a wide scale, and I'm sure it'd be a popular service. It's a bit like what the lads here call the dirty tie box, which is an aggregator of digital content. You get all of the for about the same price. You get all of the all the landline TV stations in the UK, Australia, and most of the ones in the United States.
That's highly illegal. Serious breach of copyright there.
Which is, of course, why it's based in Thailand. Where those sort of rules don't necessarily apply. So
it could up to $120,000 a year. This guy's making, Jack. Yes. This is a fellow by the name of what's his name?
Cal.
Yeah, and that's what he does. He makes a nice little earn out of that. And the Australian did reach out to him, and he said, "Yeah, look, no worries. I'm happy to confirm that he gets paid $100 a month by more than 100 prominent Australians. 100 by 100 is 10 grand, and flogs these services that." He obviously is doing a lot of cutting and pasting. Apparently, stories by Diary's own colleague, Paige Taylor, who's the Indigenous Affairs editor, have proved very, very popular. He does get Cal, this Cal fellow, he gets pinged with pesky invoices for breach of copyright and has received at least 3 of them for between $500 and $1,000 for republishing Australian content without permission.
He needs to base himself in Wahine or somewhere, I think, is the answer.
So he had to set up a hidden Facebook page so only the subscribers can see the stories. Yeah, I think the secret's out there. We don't want to spend too much time on this. I mean, look, I know people get annoyed, news consumers get annoyed about paywalls, but the simple fact of the matter is, news organisations cannot run for free. The ABC can, but it is funded, taxpayer funded. The Guardian goes around with begging bowl type exercises. Some of the television networks will obviously have free news services because they want you to watch their news, whether it's online or whether it's on television. But for the most part, news isn't free. Journalists don't get paid zero, and we're not running a charity.
And if you really want to know what the story was, if you're prepared to wait 3 or 4 days, just click on the Daily Mail online because they pinch every story that's going around in the...
Daily Mail is a free site, of course. I don't know how they make it work, but if you scroll through a Daily Mail article, regardless of whether it's somewhat lifted or not, and there are some very good journalists there, must be said.
Yes, there are.
But when you scroll through a Daily Mail article, there's just ads everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sort of going, have I finished scrolling through the ad? No, hang on. There's more there, and then there'll be another paragraph, and then another pop-up, and then, all sorts of things there. So one way or another, you're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah, but if enough people want to read something, the Daily Mail will write an article that, Jack the Insider wrote in the Australian this week, and they won't just cut and paste your entire article and have something else to say about it, but all the good bits will be pinched out of it and put on the Daily Mail online.
Speaking of content creation, Jack, the government has the federal government, the Albanese government will enshrine crucial copyright protections for the nation's creative industries. We talked about this earlier. It transpires that over a period of time, Facebook just decided, in order to load its AI stuff up, it basically went to a pirate website and ripped off literally millions of books. They like books rather than news articles, for example, when they're training their AI. And
this is the large language models. Yeah, it seems
it was a cynical exercise. I mean, the information we got was that those people involved in the project of creating Facebook's AI would say, look, we can seek copyright permission from publishers, from authors, but that's going to take too long, so we're just going to help ourselves, and if people want to sue, they'll sue later on, and we're Facebook or Meta, and we're worth billions anyway, so good luck. So anyway, I can tell you, just having a look at some polling on this, just a month or so ago, Jack, there is no love for tech companies. No. Probably nor should there be. And there is, a significant amount of support for artists, writers, journalists, etc., who have to work with the blank page, fill the blank page in and every day. And so the government has responded. We haven't seen the draft legislation yet, but Attorney General Michelle Rowland has said sensible and workable solutions, that's a quote, were needed to harness the opportunities presented by AI. Artificial intelligence, she said, presents significant opportunities for Australia and our economy. However, it's important that Australian creatives benefit from these opportunities too. Good decision?
Yeah, probably. I'm reading this as that the government has put this back in the court in the court of the tech companies. It's on their side of the net now to say, well, we're working on something. You need if you want to say in this, you need to come up with something that we think's workable.
Well, I mean, I think any published author. I think 3 of my 4 books were sitting there, lifted by Zuckerberg. There was, I think, the Atlantic had set up a click and play or click and test to see if your book appeared in one of the purloined group. So a very cynical sort of exercise from very wealthy companies. Anyway, we understand the time it would take to seek, individual permissions from publishers and authors. But oddly, Jack, the Productivity Commission was heavily on the side of the tech companies, and I just found that really sort of cynical too.
Yeah, I must say I wasn't surprised. From the Productivity Commission's point of view, anything that's going to improve productivity is good, and there's no doubt that AI will do that. It's just a question of how much cost in social and other terms you're prepared to pay to get that productivity increase.
Yeah, all right. We'll see how it goes. We'll keep an eye on that legislation. There will be a fair bit of pressure on the Albanese government to backpedal or weaken the legislation as opposed to their very strident comments to date. Yeah, copyright law shouldn't just be trodden all over. And if you are in the business of filling blank pages, and that is often a very thankless and very poorly paid job, you should at least have your property rights protected. All right. Now, Joe Hildebrand has jumped on a bit of a campaign saying the left, and Joe's a good mate of mine. I get on well with him. He's one of the sort of leftists who appears in columns, or who writes columns. I think he's still working on radio. He writes columns for the Daily Telegraph
and TV.
Sunday Telegraph.
He was big on the telly as well.
He's gone from that now. That was he got the bullet at that sort of awful Channel 10 show. Terrific bloke. Anyway, he's written, "Why can't the left be patriotic, Jack?" I'll let you go and reply to that.
Well,
Are they unpatriotic?
no, I think he's right that to some extent the left did lose its way, or has lost its way, in terms of patriotism, and that didn't used to be the case. I mean, the left is a lot more globalist than patriotic these days, generally speaking, around the world, and I think he's right about that. This is part, though, of a wider thing that your newspapers, that the News Corp papers are doing, which is to get behind this Build Back Australia process, where we'll go back to some sunlit uplands when we all made Holden cars and televisions and God knows what.
I see a fair bit of Advance Australia's influence possibly involved in that, Jack. You might remember Advance Australia. It's a political lobby group for the right. It's it's funded by a number of millionaires at best, and plays in the political space, always without very much influence, I would say. But about 6 weeks ago, we were entertained by some of their postings, and that was, there was an image of a 1972 Tirana, and they're saying, "Why can't we build these anymore?" And I was looking at it thinking, 2/3 of the people who are looking at this ad don't even know what a Tirana is, you silly buggers.
And most of the ones who drove one will be saying, "Thank God we can't make them anymore. They were a rubbish motor car."
Bloody terrible. Back in the day, just highly protected, so they were as cheap as chips compared to something that would come from Japan or the United States or Europe. Still is to some degree, but. Yeah, I just don't understand. I don't understand that. I get the sort of basis of it, that it's we should be building things, but I fail to see how we could ever have a motor vehicle manufacturing facility in this country that would mean anything, that we'd ever be able to build motor cars again. And again, it's kind of, why should we? It's the old Dave Chappelle line. We don't want to make iPhones in the United States. One, they'll cost about $7,000 to buy, and two, we don't want these jobs. We really don't want these manufacturing jobs.
Well, you look at all the money, you're old enough to remember it as I am. Look at all the money, government money, taxpayers' money, that was tipped into the motor manufacturing businesses in Australia, with some very smart people trying to keep the things afloat. People like John Button. He was a really smart man.
Yeah, he was indeed. One of our really great politicians.
Yeah.
Great service.
And they put a lot of time and a lot of money into trying to keep the things afloat. And even they couldn't.
Yeah. It just became difficult, and really the way motor vehicles are manufactured these days is multi-country stuff, right? So,
yes.
So some stuff will be built and made in India, China, the Philippines. It might be assembled in Mexico, or there might be an assembly in Detroit, but taking parts. We know this from Trump's tariffs. It's just not the way manufacturing works anymore. And when we look at Australian manufacturing of motor vehicles, there's a very large Labor component there that makes it unrealistic. So,
I mean, in blunt terms, we pay our workers a lot more than workers in, say, Thailand or Malaysia or the back blocks of China are paid, and that makes us uncompetitive with some parts of the operation.
but back to this sort of patriotism thing, Jack, and the problem I've got with a call for patriotism is that patriotism's ugly stepbrother is jingoism, and I don't know that that's necessarily it. And I think it, one can blend into the other very, very quickly. I mean, I sort of mentioned a piece about Australian values, and no one seems to know what they are. But they are. I made the point that they were driven by essentially our political institutions based on fairness and equality. Beyond that, there's a lot of flag waving and unnecessary stuff.
We've never been much of a nation for flag waving.
Yeah. Well, I think that's changed. I would say, when I was at school, we used to study one day of the year Alan Seymour's play, which was basically a sort of denigration from a younger group of people, this conflict that was driven by the older generation and a younger generation based on Anzac Day. Anzac Day back in the 70s, early 70s, had almost run its race.
It did look a bit like that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Maybe it was. I used to watch the Boer War veterans, Jack. When I was very little, you'd see there would be 10, and then the next year there'd be 7, and then the next year about 5, and then they're all gone. But yeah,
something changed all of that.
Well, it's often attributed to Howard.
I don't think that's right. I'm not sure where the cause and effect with this is, but young Australians started to go and visit Anzac Cove. Now, I don't know whether they went because Anzac Day became more popular or the fact that they were going made Anzac Day more popular.
Yeah.
But there's something around that time, and Howard happened to be Prime Minister, but I don't credit him with quite that degree of social influence. But
I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable.
But it did become popular again, and there was kind of re-interest in the idea, well, we're Aussies and we're proud to be Aussies. The Olympics had something to do with that too. The Sydney Olympics were
I think it predates that. What I would say is, you had people going along to, Gallipoli and sort of trudging around on our war dead with no great sense of what had happened, and that the Gallipoli campaign was a complete and utter disaster, utter folly, and so that needs to be recognised in all of that. What was lost really was the voice of veterans, I think, in many ways. And the veterans will always say, why are you celebrating this? It was a disaster, when they were still alive. And, I guess others go to the Western Front. A number of my friends have. I've never been to visit those places. I think there's possibly a better argument there to talk about national pride from Australia's World War I experience in Europe.
Yeah, lots of my friends have been to the Western Front. People now go to Hellfire Pass as well in Thailand, right? Up on the Burma Railway there.
Well, there's a number of people who do the Kokoda track. I've not done it. I don't think I ever will. It looks bloody hard, but for mine, that if we're looking for a day or a moment when we had, essentially becoming a nation through war is always a bit awful too. But I see that as basically the Kokoda Trail and the travails, firstly, of essentially a militia, hastily thrown together militia, and then the return of the second AIF, where Australia barely spoken of is Milne Bay, where Australia with with the Marine Corps, the US Marine Corps, defeated Japan for the very first time in battle for 20-odd years. And so I don't know. I think patriotism without a proper understanding of history is always going to be a bit broken and will veer into sort of jingoism.
Yeah, for me, the real test is not so much the wars that have been won or lost or whatever. It is, and this is a practical test in an era of high immigration, is will new arrivals to Australia see themselves as Australian? Is the culture strong enough to absorb them? That's Europe's folly now, that it doesn't, that their culture isn't really strong enough. They think it's strong because it's old, but it isn't strong enough. That's why Angela Merkel, Nicolas Sarkozy, David Cameron, all considered then that multiculturalism in Europe had failed, and that's because they'd lost what I think is the proper sense of patriotism, which is a commitment to a culture and an idea.
And I think that's where we probably should be looking for our patriotism, Jack. And we do see these things, particularly around Australia Day, and where our immigrants become Australian citizens, and the pride that they feel being a citizen of the Commonwealth of Australia. And I think there's much to learn there, because we do see perhaps more of the outpouring of humble patriotism from our newer arrivals than we do perhaps from people who've been here for a lot longer.
Yeah, during the time I spent deciding refugee cases, I was often astounded. You'd get some chap from Shanghai or somewhere, and he could explain in 2 minutes how the rule of war worked and why it was important in a way that most of my colleagues who were lawyers had no concept of and couldn't get near explaining properly. And that's because he or she had grown up in the absence of those things, so they knew why they were important. We get lazy about stuff like this because we just take them for granted. Right?
Yeah, I agree. And so I think the lesson here is less flag waving and more listening to some of our new arrivals, and they will tell us what this country means to them and what it should mean to all of us. It's essentially about opportunity. That's what Australia is. I mean, it's opportunity wrapped in fairness. Everyone treated more or less the same. Everyone gets to vote. Over 18 years of age anyway, everyone gets to vote. They get the chance to say who they'd prefer to have as their representatives. And so those are another crucial sorts of things. Our constitutional forefathers, who were not big names like Jefferson, Washington, Adams, our constitutional forefathers created a democracy that is kind of the envy of the world, and it really is robust and can take a lot of pressures, social pressures that come around. You would not say the same of the UK or the US at the moment.
And to be fair, a fair bit of that constitution, etc., was written on a boozy weekend on a yacht in North,
running
North
running a red line through Fisher's draft. Yeah.
The Bill Bryson tells a great story of a migrant telling him that when he arrived in Australia immediately post-war, he was required to report in at his local police station when he'd left the migrant camp. He'd been in Bonagilla up near Albury Wodonga, and so he gets a job and he moves back to Melbourne, moves into the city, and goes to the local police station. He said that you've got to just sort of report in. So this is where I've gone. So we can keep the record of where the migrants, just a demographic record. So he goes in there, and there's a big desk, as they used to have in police stations in those days, with a crusty sergeant sitting up the top. and he sort of sheepishly gives his name and his address, and he's a bit worried. And he says that the big copper stands up from his chair and comes around from behind the desk. And the bloke's from Eastern Europe somewhere, and he's thinking, shit, this bloke's going to belt the crap out of me.
And drag you off to a prison cell.
Yeah, and drag you off to a prison cell. And the sergeant stuck a meaty hand out and shook his hand and says, welcome to Australia, son.
Yeah, I mean, the lovely stories like that. I follow a number of people. There's a German fellow, and then there's an American woman, and it's their experiences on Instagram, their experiences of Australian life, and it's often done in a really charming way, not effusive. The German guy, he says, look, if you're going to come to Australia, you've got to have a car. It's just vast amounts of space between places. But overall, I mean, there is this sense from these people who are who are essentially our visitors and hopefully long-term residents and maybe citizens. They are saying that the Australian people are so open, and particularly the German fellow says this. We don't talk to each other in queues in Germany. In Australia, basically people just say, "How you going, mate? You're right," and all that sort of stuff. So there's an openness, there's a sense of fairness, and look, we're far from perfect. Let's not wrap ourselves up too much, but by gee, we go better than most of the rest of the world in a lot of these things.
It should be possible to be proud of what we are without pissing in our own pocket.
Yeah, I think that's about right too. But let's move on, and because there are some
speaking of Australian industries, are we going to have our own homegrown organised crime worldwide outfit?
Exactly
the tobacco
right.
thing's out of hand.
This is just bad policy and where it lands when it's just awful. So we're talking again about the tobacco racket. Coles announced today their tobacco sales are down 57%, and that's sort of pretty much where the Commonwealth excise figures are at too, Jack. So around about 2/3 reduction in their excise collections because people are buying from the black market, of course.
Coles' numbers is that they've sold 63% fewer packets of cigarettes.
Yeah. And look, none of these figures are alarming. I've been following this for a long time. The other thing to note, Jack, is that what you'll see with this sort of black market is that, and how it's grown, is that the excise got to a point where there was still, it was still rising. Cigarettes were $35, $40 a packet, but people were still buying them. But then there was really a tipping point on that excise, and they come in every year. They're annualised. I think they might even be twice a year when they're ratcheted up. But there was a point there where people said that's enough, and there was a burgeoning and now well-established black market. Now, we've mentioned these on the show before. There's a factory in Iraq that makes our black market cigarettes, some of them anyway, a lot of them. These things would be, now that we've got to this point where we've got this black market that's worth billions now to those who control it, and is the envy of organised crime syndicates around the world too. Others are looking at this and going, how can we get into this? There is no way out. The only way out would be to reduce excise back to when it was $25 a packet. But then you'd still have problems because a packet of durries would cost you $12, $10, $8.
But reducing the profit margin is the only thing you can do. I mean, you look
reducing the excise, you mean?
Yeah. You can. But reducing the profit margin, that's what I'm talking about for the people who are running this, right? And the way to do that is to reduce the excise. You can look at this and say, well, it's too late, we can't do anything. But the danger of doing that is once you entrench organised crime into a sector of society in a way that it's being done now, it will be a thing that you lose all control over and will take over other aspects of Australian society. It's a very, very dangerous spot we're in.
I'm honestly at the point where I don't think anything can be done. Even if you took excise to zero and made us like, let's say, if you ever bought a packet of bungers in Singapore, it costs you around about $18 a packet. So that is if we took all the excise off the table. But we do have a well-entrenched black market. Yes, it would. Well, it won't reduce their profit margin if they're able to sell a packet of durries to you for $12 or $14. Clearly, there is a problem, and I just don't know what the response needs to be from government. I mean, what they should be doing is hanging their bloody heads. They got rid of vapes. Now, vapes are highly controversial. I get that. But there is a certain amount of data that suggests that people who use vapes are getting off the durries and using them that way. But they just straight outright banned them with a silly sort of policy that was Greens contrived, funnily enough, that you could, if you're in possession of a prescription for a vape, you could buy one at the chemist, but no one had bothered telling the chemists or the pharmacy guild, and they said, we don't want to be stocking these things. So that all sort of fell apart. So now these things are completely unregulated, vaping, vaping or vapes themselves are now, being huffed and puffed by people without any real sense of what they're taking. So that's dangerous from a public health point of view. As smoking rates are continuing on the cigarettes, as smoking rates continue to decline. And that's really because it's got nothing to do with plain packaging. I'm convinced of this. It's got nothing to do with plain packaging. It's got nothing to do with excise and price points. It might to a little degree where people say, I can't afford to smoke anymore, so I've got to get off them. But generally speaking, our smoking rates are down because there was a hell of a lot of advertising in the 70s and 80s and 90s that said, here's some informed choice. You run the risk of serious health problems, right? Here's the information. You make your own choices. And that should be the guiding principle on all of these things that are, whether it's cigarettes, booze, drugs for that matter, gambling. Here's the information. You make your own choices.
Yeah, telling people what to do is never a great plan.
Well, that's what the exercise was all about. Moving on to another little rort, Jack. State governments in this country are absolutely addicted to stamp duty, and God knows what would happen if they ever let loose this grip. But Reserve Bank of Australia Governor Michelle Bullock has criticised stamp duty as a barrier to retirees downsizing, and it is, and people's ability to move for work amid declining household sizes and a national housing crisis. For those people who don't know, if you're looking at a purchase of a property around about $800,000, now that won't even get you into Sydney, but let's just stick with that figure. You're looking at paying upwards of around $45,000 to $50,000 in stamp duty when you purchase that place. There are some exceptions. There are some exceptions for first home buyers in certain states, provided that they live in that property is their principal place of residence. But if you're a second home buyer, investor, whatever, you are going to be paid through the nose with stamp duty, Jack.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this was that it was the Reserve Bank governor coming out now and saying this. This is a problem.
Yeah.
And
so 1.5 million in New South Wales property purchase there will cost you 65,000. I mean, that's a chunk of money. And that is, I'd say that's going to prohibit a lot of people from entering into the market.
Yeah.
Being first-time buyers, if there are no stamp stamp duty exemptions. But it's also, as the Reserve Bank has covered, basically people downsizing, getting older, wanting a smaller property, etc. They can sell their current property, move into another one, but in doing so, the new purchase is going to cost them, let's say, on a $1.5 million property, is going to cost them $65,000.
And it's kind of hard enough to get people in those years to do that. because they're comfortable where they are. It's the family home sort of thing. So, there are things that can attract them. Has the new place got level access? They're starting to get to the point where getting up and down the steps is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So if you find somewhere with level access, but then if the sticking point is, well, we're going to have to put our hand in our pocket for 60 or 80 or 100 grand, then they won't. They'll stay where they are.
All right, moving on.
But the solution to this, there's all this talk about what different states are doing and all that kind of stuff. This is something that really, I think, that the federal government needs to lead on and say, let's get everyone around the table and try and find a solution to this.
Well, the problem is, Jack, they're addicted to the revenue. I mean, if they're going to give up stamp duty, we're going to have to start gambling a lot more.
Well, they were addicted to all sorts of state taxes until the GST thing came in, and before that, until Hawke and Keating got around the table. This is what's got to happen.
Look, I don't think people would be too bothered about stamp duty per se. Just the rate of it is the problem.
Yeah.
And when it's linked to basically explosion in housing prices, it just becomes a problem. And will lead state governments to think, you beauty, how good's this? Meanwhile, Jack, Pauline Hanson's One Nation, they've changed their name, and now it's just One Nation.
Yeah, well, I think was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? You said they've got to they're going to be have any significant impact. They've got to lose to Pauline Hanson One Nation, and I tell you what, Pauline was listening.
She must have been listening. Yeah, she has,
because she's raced out and done exactly that. Right?
Yeah, and their polling is sort of getting up to around the 15% mark, Jack.
Well, it is. I mean, their polling's really solid.
Well, you can actually see. When I looked at a poll during the week, I think that was Essential Research. Liberals 26 or Coalition 26, and you can actually see all of that bleeding over to One Nation.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's protest vote or more substantial, I don't. Only time will tell, really. But all of those won't stay with Pauline Hanson's, but with One Nation. But the base of One Nation is really very solid. There's a good 8-9% that absolutely will stay with them. Well, I think I did mention this, that was last week or the week before, but they are also building sort of, structures in electorates that just weren't there before. So that will give them, just some volunteers, people to hand out, those sorts of things that they miss out a fair bit from. It's never a good idea to name a political party, put someone's name on it, because if that person wanders off for whatever reason, you're still left with this party and you've got to go through a rebranding. Better to do it now, as One Nation has done. But they're also, I think, looking at possible seats in the lower house. And we mentioned Barnaby Joyce as a potential winner for them in New England, and I had a look at his vote. I mean, you asked me last week, and I wasn't sure of how the New England vote went last election, but he has a significant personal following. One Nation has a significant vote in that electorate anyway, which would all go to him. So whatever he lost from a national candidate, I can only imagine he would still win the seat fairly comfortably. There's still talk of him going to the Senate rather than the reps, or staying in the reps for One Nation. But I think that's where the party, if they're serious about it, that's where they have to go. They need to win some lower house seats, I should say.
It's starting to look to me like there was a moment with the Democrats when the Democrats started, they were kind of Don Chip's plaything.
Yeah.
Right. And then they turned, as Don got older, they actually turned into a proper political party, at least for a while. Right. And that's where I think One Nation is at the moment. Are they going to be Pauline Hanson's plaything, or are they going to be a serious second-tier political party?
I think the wider problem they have too, Jack, is that they're not going to be able to compete with any success in the reps around the major cities as it stands. So that that's not a rebranding. That's looking at your policies. And once you start tinkering with that, or your platform, really, once you start tinkering with that, it can go horribly wrong very quickly.
You can lose your base. Yep.
Yeah, all right. The Great Heist. We were probably a little. I was probably a little excited about all of this. It seemed like we were witness to thieving geniuses.
Or so it looked like.
Now it's increasingly, with a number of arrests being made from the Louvre smash and grab, the French crown jewels gone missing. It seems like there might have just been quite a few just idiots involved in it.
Well, fairly clever, but they didn't seem to have an exit plan.
Yeah, they just turned up at the airports. It's better get out of here. One bloke wanted to fly to North Africa.
And he was a bit slow getting to Charles de Gaulle. It took him a week or so to get there.
You just jump in the car and you go to Spain and you find your way there pretty easily, rather than turn up at an airport. So it's entirely possible. They're now putting in a figure of 150 million, that's US dollars, on the heist. While there have been a number of arrests, I think 2 now, or possibly 3 have been arrested. No sign of the jewels, Jack.
No.
And
well,
I think we might not see them ever again.
Whether that means that there was a mastermind behind it who was prepared to throw these people under the bus, I don't know.
All right, moving on. Japan, Jack, has their first woman prime minister.
Did you see her at the APEC and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, she's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought, gee, she looks like she fits the bill, doesn't she?
Yeah, well, she's a conservative, friends with Donald Trump, but everyone has to have some positive attachment with Trump, otherwise they tend to struggle. She also met Margaret Thatcher, Jack.
Yeah, apparently she did
woman.
back in the day. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she goes. I mean, Japan's a very terribly important country, and
it is, but it's also incredibly volatile politically, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it used to be. It was like the old Italian governments, the Japanese governments. They'd have a use-by date on about 3 months. It's certainly stabilised, but there is a fair amount of tension in the system at any given time.
Yeah, a part of that's because it's effectively a one-party state, really, and so these are internal party conflicts.
All righty, moving on to Argentina. We did talk about this. The midterms were coming. Argentina's president, self-confessed libertarian, Javier Milei, he's had a landslide victory in Sunday's midterm elections. His party, La Libertad Avanza, won nearly 41% of the vote, taking 13 of 24 Senate seats and 64 of the 127 lower house seats that were contested. How much do you think that is attributable? I mean, look, when you talk about 40% in the Senate, 41%, I think it was standing around 13 or 14 before the election.
Yes.
So it's a significant gain. How much of that is attributable to the Trump bailout, Jack?
It's kind of hard to know. I've got to say, did you see the footage of Milei after the election results were announced?
Oh, I can only imagine he was happy, Jack.
Well, and my takeaway from it was, this is a lot better than he was expecting.
Yeah, I'm going to say, even 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that is pre-Trump bailout, it didn't look good. It didn't look good at all. There are some really big economic problems in Argentina, must be said. But then there was the big multi-billion-dollar bailout from the Trump administration, and I just wondered how much of that played into the politics. Yeah,
I don't know. I wouldn't say he was surprised. I think, but I think it was better than he was expecting.
And about 50% of Argentinians are living under poverty, Jack. So you would imagine that, it's a pretty volatile political environment as well. So it's quite astonishing, and I am genuinely surprised. Was genuinely surprised to see the result there. Meanwhile, Jack, in Gaza, Hamas is asserting more armed control. There were some shenanigans over the recovery and return of hostage bodies, and it did require J.D. Vance to come in and say the ceasefire will hold while the IDF were blasting away in Gaza, Jack.
Well, a condition of the ceasefire was that
Well, you would ceasefire.
A condition of the agreement, or whatever you want to call it, was that Hamas not have a place. Yeah. So that's going to be the sticking point. If the thing's to hold, something has to be done about Hamas, and then it becomes a question of who's going to do that.
Yeah. And that will not be an undertaking that many countries would want to do voluntarily, because it's going to be extremely dangerous, and there will be people coming home damaged, injured, and possibly dead.
Yes. So but that's the condition, and that's going to have to be met, and it's either going to be the Arab neighbours or Israel, or a combination of the two, and this time gloves off.
Yeah, I just don't know how much more. When I'm talking about the people of Gaza who are not associated with Hamas, I just don't know how much more that they can withstand. But yeah, this is the problem. This is the big hurdle. King Abdullah of Jordan, when he talks about peacekeeping force, he says if it's peace enforcing, nobody will want to touch that. If we're running around Gaza on patrol with weapons, that's not a situation that any country would like to get involved in. The Saudis and Emiratis will tell you the same behind closed doors. Well, the quote would like to get involved in. The Saudis and Emiratis will tell you the same behind closed doors is
the difference
statement from the reporters.
The difference is that the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians would very much prefer to get rid of Hamas, right? But they don't want to spend too much blood and treasure doing it.
No, it's blood. It's blood.
Yeah.
It's blood. It's about blood.
Yeah. The Israelis are in a different situation. They've got them next door. They need to get rid of them. So they will. That's the difference. The motivation is the difference.
Yeah, but it's going to take time, and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. All right, moving on, Jack. We must really briefly touch on the furore associated with Anthony Albanese wearing a T-shirt with the words "Joy Division" written on them. A dance band in the UK from the 80s, 90s, and Susan Lee. I know it made the Sky News After Dark with. There were comments there from Shari Markson, and Shari had explained what Joy Division actually meant, and it was a reference to a concentration camp practice where some of the more preferred inmates were allowed to enjoy the sexual pleasures of women who were kept there for that purpose. She also made it clear that in a podcast. Anthony Albanese was told what Joy Division meant, what the origin of the band's name was, as I just spelled it out. Susan Ley went quite hard on this, Jack, and I just sort of left to the wisdom of Jane Hume, which is a questionable thing at the best of times, when she said, look, I think anyone who wears a rock band T-shirt is a bit naff anyway. Agree with that. But really, we're not that interested. So the sort of criticism that Susan Ley did, and I just don't understand the wisdom of it, was, sort of created at least the perception of more division within her own party.
I don't no idea why you want to touch this. Jane Hume's actually spot on the money. If you want to say anything about it at all, just make a comment about it. It does look a bit naff getting off the Australian VIP plane wearing an old band T-shirt. Yeah.
It does. And I'll tell you what it meant. I was talking to some people at the Oz. It was sort of Anthony Albanese. Maybe we're attaching too much motive to it, but it was Anthony Albanese getting off the burner and saying, I am the boss. I can do pretty much as I please. But wearing rock band T-shirts is just his way of saying that in many ways. I just didn't buy the anti-Semitism stuff. I mean, that was just nonsense. And Susan Ley, come on, pick your fights a bit better than that.
He's just a bit old to be getting off the plane wearing a band T-shirt.
I used to have a Kiss T-shirt, Jack. You know,
really?
It was the Destroyer album coming. I was 14. You know, so that's the last time I remember wearing a rock band T-shirt. You ever wear one?
I'm not sure you could squeeze into a T-shirt you had when you were 14.
No, most definitely not. No, did you ever wear one? Bit of Slade or Stones or what was it?
I had an Oils.
Did you? Oh, you crazy lefty.
Like a T-shirt and a singlet as well. I think I got them both. I can't remember why.
Very Peter Garrett. So there you go. But these are things that we tend to regret as we get older.
Oh, I don't regret having worn that, but I'm not sure I'd be wearing it today.
Yeah, that's what I mean. All right, moving on. APEC conference, Jack. What's going on there? We've got Donald Trump meeting with President Xi. Elbow just pretty much along for the ride, I think. And what other things are at play at the APEC conference this time? Who's hosting it, by the way?
Korea.
Yeah, okay.
The Republic of Korea. I always think with these things, it all looks good on the spot when they're doing it, and whether it's been a good idea or whether it's work, you find out in 6 months' time.
What's likely to happen with the meeting with between President Trump and President Xi? Are we putting too much into this, and they'd prefer to discuss this in a bilateral way in another context?
Well, it seems to have gone all right, but it's how these things work in practice that tells the story. And I think they're meeting. I think Trump's going to Beijing in April, so by about then we'll know whether this meeting's been successful and whether the next one will be. All
right. We're talking about politicians and their backstories. Does it work to invent one? Well, George Santos, recently released from jail and pardoned or had sentence commuted by Donald Trump. He made up a lot of things, Jack. The stuff with the dog is just terrible. And I've seen him interviewed recently since his release. He has no sense that, you know, he's a liar and fantasist. I mean, he just continues to try and justify it. But we know about him. You're saying that George Newsom is joining the trend. He's doing podcasts with young black influencers, telling them how he had to hustle to make ends meet, living on Wonder Bread and mac and cheese when he was a kid.
Yeah, I saw this on social media, the interview when he was doing this. And the trouble with this is not a political thing. Politicians across the board do it. It took, these days with the internet, it took people about 5 minutes to find photos of him, because by the time he was 25, he was a part owner of a winery in Northern California. Right. And his father was the preferred lawyer of the Getty family.
Yeah, right? Chief counsel.
Chief counsel for the Getty family. So, you know, and of course
there are all these.
Yeah, so there are all these photos appeared within an hour, right, of this podcast hitting the screen, and I just kind of wonder why politicians do this to themselves.
It's what we call the log cabin mythology, with a bit of a tilt, with a bit of a nod towards Abraham Lincoln, which was a genuine
cabin story. Yes.
Genuine story. Yeah. Kevin Rudd, we might remember. And I'm not.
Oh, we slept in the car. That's right. I've forgotten about that.
He declared himself homeless at one point, and it wasn't just one night. I mean, he was slept in the car for a number of nights, and look, that obviously had an impact on him. Malcolm Turnbull, we might remember, grew up in Double Bay in a very small room, and I can tell you, because we lived in the same block of apartments many years later. And the second bedroom was very small, Jack.
Yeah.
But
But he wasn't
it's hard,
well.
and I described it later as he went from rags to riches without changing postcodes. But
And to be fair, he was at Grammar, right? He was at Sydney Grammar.
yeah, and his father, I think, was a sort of
Hotel broker.
publican's agent, something like that.
Hotel broker.
Yeah, hotel broker. That's the right way of putting it. So I think there is a temptation to do this come from nothing, look what I've achieved type mythology around politicians. We don't see it so much. I mean, Albo did live in public housing, was raised by a single mother. And I think, when it's genuine, I think these things can be compelling. When it's a little bit dressed up, it's not so much, it's not so persuasive.
No, Keir Starmer saying every opportunity his father was a toolmaker. It became such a joke. Even his staff have told him to stop saying it, right?
One of my favourite stories about Jeanette Howard. Jeanette, there was a hagiography published about John Howard not long after he'd been elected Prime Minister, or his government had been elected, and he became Prime Minister. So there was an hagiography written. What's his name? Barnett was the author, the husband of former New South Wales politician whose name's on the tip of my tongue, but it won't matter. And look, as part of the approved biography, he sent the manuscript to John and Jeanette. Now, John, I think, sent it back with if there are any corrections, they weren't significant. But in the biography, Barnett had described how Jeanette Howard's father was a train driver, and she'd got the red pen out and ran that, and she's gone up from she actually moved away from the log cabin mythology. She insisted that her father be referred to as a locomotive engineer, Jack. There you go. Iran.
I seriously don't know why politicians bother with all this stuff. I mean, just be yourself.
It's genuine, but if you're going to try and be someone other than you're not, we'll get to Oasis in a little while. You got to be yourself. You can't be no one else. Iran is the regime struggling, Jack?
Well, they've pulled back on the restriction on women and headscarves, head coverings.
After executing a bunch of people and dragging them off to jail.
Yes. So they certainly were enforcing it with vigour, and they seem now to be pulling back from that. And you just wonder whether the US and Israeli strikes on Iran have rattled them enough that they're going to have that they're pulling back to survive.
Look, there may be a fair bit to that. Economically, Iran is struggling.
Yes.
And there is also a substantial middle class in Tehran and elsewhere in the major cities. And basically, if you've got a sort of burgeoning middle class, they want some sort of, they want political representation, but they'll want not to be oppressed.
Yes.
So I was actually quite astonished to see that the initial response to that, excuse me, that sort of people's uprising based on dress and modesty and all this sort of stuff. I was really quite surprised to see Iran really react badly, or the regime really react badly and lock a lot of people up. There were thousands arrested, many, many hundreds were executed just in the last sort of 12 months. And now they've gone the other way. And it tells you that at very least, that there's a sort of erratic nature to the government at the moment.
Yeah. I had put in something for us to talk about today from a speech that Andrew Neil did, and we'll get to it perhaps next week, because it's about the future of the centre-right. And you and I have been talking about that, and I think he's good on it. There's just one thing that I wanted to tell you that kind of fits in. It was when I think Eisenhower was the presidential candidate. This is what Andrew Neil calls the height of country club republicanism. Eisenhower won 190 of the 200 richest counties in the US in an election, and Kamala Harris won 190 of the 200 richest counties in the US, which is just a measure of how much that switched around. That the rich people were all Republicans, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and now that's turned around. But let's get back to that next week when we've got more time.
Yeah, when we do have a little bit more time.
We have to get on to sport.
We do need to get on to sport. There's a fair bit to cover in the United States. I do want to go through some job figures and some layoffs, some significant layoffs through corporate America. So the jobs mantra that the Democrats should be coming up with, jobs, is just not happening at the moment. That'll highlight one thing, but we will look at that. We will perhaps even move on the White House ballroom until next week as well. There's all sorts of Trump stuff that we can have a look at, including his dementia test, Jack, which he's absolutely slammed it, by the way. He's done a beautiful job with the dementia test. You got to wonder why he was given one.
Best ever?
Yeah, I think definitely it was. Yeah, certainly in the top 2 or 3%. So we'll move on to that because we do have a lot to get through. But we will be Trump heavy next week, folks. We need to move on. In the cricket, in the women's cricket, and I watched it last night, so I'm probably a little bit tired today. They were beaten by India. The Indian skipper had batted beautifully. Must be said, the Australian women dropped her a couple of times, pretty easy ones. And it's kind of, I don't think it's the end of an era at all, but I just think it's actually good for cricket what happened. Phoebe Litchfield, she's a gun. She'd be about 45 kilograms dripping wet. And she just smacks it around the park, but all good cricket shots too. And she was brilliant in the field. Like I say, most of the fielding was excellent, but Alyssa Healy dropped a catch with the gloves on, just a sky ball. Might have been a bit distracted by the bowler. There are a couple of other catches that went down, and really the best side that we've been talking about, the best team in any sport, has just fallen off just the once, Jack.
Well, I think it is good for a sport to not have someone dominate it too much. So who wins from here, do you think?
I think India now. Yeah, I think they should have enough confidence from that win to beat mighty Australia to go on and win the tournament. What have we got? England and South Africa in the next semi, and that'll be tonight, I presume.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd imagine India will win. I think they'll have they'll make England not without a chance. Let's put it that way. All right. Meanwhile, Ashes selection speculation has reached fever pitch, Jack. Give me your top 6. We know Carey will bat at 7. We know the bowlers. We know who the bowlers will be. Give me your top 6.
Just before I do, there was a lovely little video of Sam Constance executing a superb drive through mid-on, and the comment on below it was, Sam Constance is at the front of the queue for the way he went about it runs, even though he only got 10. Right?
Well, he shouldered arms to a ball that hit middle.
He did.
So,
he did.
So look, cricket's a tough game, and one of the blokes that I was looking at, born in Northern Territory, Jake Weatherall, playing for Tasmania, just hasn't made the runs critical times, and that's what selection's got to be about. You've got to pick blokes that are in runs, not just based on, well, we need to drop one bloke, we need to put one in. You've got to have someone there who's in the peak of their powers and in confidence. So
and feeling confident. To be fair to Constance, did you watch the ball that he shouldered arms to?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So left arm around the wicket, and it was bowled wide enough.
Yeah, probably pitched half a metre outside the off peg, but
yeah,
come on, mate. Yeah. Well, there's only two leaves two leaves in cricket, good ones and bad ones, and the bad ones you wander off. And like I did it playing cricket when playing Marsland one day, Jack, at Ivanhoe, and the old man came down for a rare look, and he just turned up, and I got about 20 odd, and then I shouldered arms and got cleaned right up. A bloke that bowled a big in swinger. Anyway, so it does happen. I think
you'd have heard about that around the breakfast table for a while.
I know, didn't mention it. Actually, didn't mention it. Didn't say anything. Didn't say anything about it. It was probably just horrified.
Which is even worse.
Wasn't a bad nut. Wasn't a bad nut, to be honest. A bit of weight swing, but anyway, you can always say that when you get cleaned up. So here's my top six, if you don't mind. Usman Khawaja got 87 the other day against New South Wales. He should open with Marnus. I think the knock that we had on it, that Marnus and Usman wouldn't score quick enough. I think there'll be a bit of a push for Usman for Marnus to just keep ticking it over. I'm not convinced that Green will bat at 3. He either will or he'll bat at 4, and Smith will either bat at 4 or bat at 3. At Head and Webster. So there's your 6. So it's pretty uncontroversial.
I'd go along with that, more or less, yeah.
Pretty uncontroversial. And when you think about it, Smith got 100. I think his first 100 in Shield cricket for 6 years probably, and played that many games, to be fair. He's in form. And have you seen his stats as captain of Australia, Jack?
No.
He averages 70. And he's made 1600s. So, England might want to be worried about what they careful of what they wish for with Cummins missing, because Smith might just turn it on and just become. Well, he is one of the world's great. He was one of the great batsmen of all time. He belongs in that group, but he might just say, "Well, Joe, why is everyone talking about Joe Root? Here's me."
I watched his first 20 balls in that Shield 100. It was classic Steve Smith. You kind of looked at it and thought, this bloke's not going to get off the mark. There were all sorts of weird and wonderful follows through and carries on. And he didn't look like hitting one for a little while. But then once he gets going, he's going.
I only saw the highlights, and there was a Facebook page that showed the 17 boundaries, and he looked all right in each one. But you would get that, with boundaries.
You know how he starts. He can look terrible starting, right?
Meanwhile, I think still gets pretty nervous, but he could be in for a huge summer. The other thing to talk about is England's 11 and just what they're going to do. Crash Craddock did a little video report talking about Jofra Archer. And she said Jofra Archer hasn't played a game of first-class cricket since July. The England one-day squad, which he's a member, is in New Zealand at the moment. And he missed the first game. He did play in the second bowl. Okay, got 3 for Daryl Mitchell, belted him around a little bit. And then, so my issue with this is Jofra Archer and Mark Wood, neither of whom have great ability to bounce back after a test. So we've got Perth, a couple of weeks. Is it Gabba, Adelaide? I think it is Gabba, Adelaide. And then Melbourne, and those next 3 tests, and you throw in the Sydney as the 5th one. They as a 5th test, they are really just, there's not a lot of time between them. And
I don't think you can play. I don't think you should play Archer and Wood in the same team. I think you play one or the other, and even if you alternate them. Because neither of them are very good at getting through a test match, let alone backing up.
Yeah, I think there are some issues there, and you might not see this in Perth, but the fact that they haven't bought a specialist spinner on tour, I think that will cost them, particularly in Adelaide, possibly Melbourne, definitely Sydney. So I think there are issues there.
The problem is
neither side has. But with the exception of Smith that we just talked about, Joe Root hasn't made runs in New Zealand. But neither side's had a wonderful preparation. I mean, there's a lot of focus
Harry
on
Brook,
Australia's, but England's had a pretty ordinary prep too.
Harry Brook made about 80% of the runs when they got skittled the other day.
Yeah, can play. We know that. Yeah. But first thing is New Zealand. The Black Caps basically just ripped through them. Brook was left batting with the tail, which he did magnificently, and knocked the ball around. I think New Zealand still won the game.
Yes, they did.
And in the second test, well, Brook only got 30. Second ODI. That Brook got about 30 odd, and I think they were all left for 170. So,
but it's going to be fun to watch Brook in Australia. I think he's a really, really good cricketer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Australia are going to win the series comprehensively, it would probably come to him having not a great tour. I think Joe Root, he's sort of set. He's set to make 100, needs to make 100. Those two blokes, if they can get runs, England will go a long way to winning the series, but we'll see. AFL, Jack, why are we still talking about it? What's going on there?
Well, no, this just struck me the other day that a bloke like Tom Mitchell struggling to find a home, and he's a Brownlow medal winner, premiership player, and I think he still holds the record for the most number of possessions.
What a Collingwood said. Is it Collingwood, isn't he?
Yeah.
They just told him to go and find another club.
Yeah, they have.
Carlton did the most remarkable thing. They had a player called by the name of Jackson Binns. He's got a contract till next year, and they delisted him.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
This
kind of struck me. This is a strange world we live in.
Look, I just thought that was really, really odd.
I mean, there's always a few blokes who have been pretty good players who get delisted because they're just too close to the end, right? The club doesn't want to have to look after them. But there are now players who are actually not bad, pretty good. Yeah.
We'll get to racing in a minute, Jack. The Spring Carnival, but probably the big story in sport around the world this year is that the FBI have made multiple arrests, more than 30 people, including Portland Trail Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups and Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier. And the Rozier case is really strong. And it's all over illegal betting and contrived betting and inside information and the mobs involved and all this sort of stuff, Jack. And this is not the first time the NBA has had betting controversies. There was a significant one that they just swept under the carpet about 10 years ago. But now here we are again. If you don't fix these things, they will come back.
The Rozier case is quite straightforward.
Yeah.
What he's been charged with is underperforming, deliberately underperforming.
He told everyone he was going to be going off with an injury early in the game, and he did.
So he played 9 minutes. And on the futures market, his friends and colleagues, I think he normally scores about 25 points a game, and he scored 10 or something.
Obviously, the Italian-American friends would be betting on him having a very low stat day and wins significant amounts of money on that.
Yes. So that's really easy to do. And personally, I think part of the problem with this and with
the players don't get enough money.
Well, no, and this happens in cricket as well.
They paid in millions, so I really there's no defence there.
No. I think the problem for the sport is that when you allow betting on little bits of the sport rather than who wins or loses, right? That's too easy to fix. So if it's like. In cricket, the Indian bookmakers will take a bet on spot betting. That's the term I was looking for. Spot betting's a problem because it's really hard to defend against someone pulling an injury and going off after 9 minutes. It's really hard to defend against someone having 2 bad overs in the middle of a one-day international.
Well, 31 other people have been charged in a separate illegal poker game involving retired players and the mafia, Jack. Did you read much about how they rigged the game?
Yes, I did.
Quite intricate, and
A lot of preparation involved.
Yeah, it really did look like a mob scam. So to some extent, people have lost, millions in these poker games, and then they have gone on to be extorted further, threatened with violence, these sorts of things. Now, but there is no case of a NBA player losing money there, a current one, and then having to provide inside information as a result. It's just part of the whole hookup. But like I say, NBA had a major problem with this going back about 10 years ago, chose to do very little, and now it's just come back to bite them. You know? And you can't use the excuse that the players don't make enough money because they're all on multi-million-dollar contract.
Yeah, so that doesn't wash with me. But the only thing that concerned me is when you lump all of these things in together and it's an FBI announcement, it's the, what did we say in Australia? The blackest day in Australian sport. I don't like that.
Well, the Rosie case is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that looks pretty straightforward. But I don't like lumping them together. So if there's the Rosier case and there's other mafia case, keep them separate.
You've always been pro-mafia, though, haven't you? You've
always
been pro-mafia. You hate RICO laws, look, but I think you're right. A darkest day in Australian sport. Where'd that come from?
That was the two ministers announcing the inquiry into Essendon, that was a terribly badly handled thing from start to finish.
You want to see a dark day in sport? Watch Essendon play now. I don't know that the club's actually recovered from that. I still think there's a hangover there around the place culturally.
Yes.
That's come from that peptides supplement scandal. Yeah, and look, I think you're right. Let's see the rollout of the case and how strong they've got against, people like Chauncey Billups, who's he's a coach of an NBA franchise. All right, Jack, guide us through the Spring Carnival, mate. I haven't had much of a look, to be honest.
It was the last Cox Plate under the old.
It was indeed,
and the old makeup of Moonee Valley, which they're in the process of pulling down already, which I think is a tragedy because I think it was the current layout and the way the track works is what makes the race, in my view.
And what we're talking about there, folks, for those not in the equine arts or appreciators of the equine arts, is a narrow turns and uphill straight.
Yeah, well,
that's about it, isn't it?
It runs uphill from, as it has existed up till now. The track requires the horses to climb from about the last 650 metres, go around a cambered turn and hit a very short straight, which means they're working hard from 600 out.
It's a short uphill straight. That's the other thing.
Which gives you. It's the reason nearly always the best horse wins. Anyway, so that's gone. But look, the Spring Carnival will be a success. Just one thing on the side, there's a English blogger called Racing Blogger who's out here, and he's creating a huge impression on Twitter and stuff because he's a kind of personable sort of bloke. He goes around and talks to all the jockeys and trainers, and he's just got that little bit of a gift that people like to tell him things. And he's having the best time. He's now getting invited everywhere and will make a big splash. But someone will give him a job out of all this. Have a full time.
I mean, that's the English racing woman now. She works for Channel 7, when Channel 7 was doing, I don't even know who's doing the Cup now. Is it? I can't remember the free
seven, I think.
But they had this and I think she still works for whatever network does it, but rather upper crust English woman. And she sort of, not inveigled her way, came onto the scene and everyone just thought she was wonderful. So she ended up being a commentator. I think she works around the mounting yard now too. Presenting the horses.
Francesca Camani. Her father's a trainer. Yes.
So there's jobs there for them. Got a Melbourne Cup tip, or is it a bit early? We'll do that next week.
We'll do that. We might be been and gone by then, but no, I don't have a tip just yet.
Yeah, all right, mate. Okay, well,
I would save your winnings on half yours. I think he was a really good thing in the Caulfield Cup. I'm not quite so
not
sure.
quite so sure about the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
My connection to that horse is really sentimental, so I'll have a bit of a lash anyway. All right, well, that takes us out.
Oh, are you going to Oasis next week? Will we see you before then?
Well, we'll record before then. Yes, I am going to Oasis on Saturday week.
Okay.
One of my mates.
So we've got time. You can tell us all about it beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to write a bit about it next week before I go. This will actually be the last Australian show for Oasis. They have a little bit of a break, and then they finish off their world tour in South America, and then that's it.
Yes.
Yes, I'll be making a report beforehand and afterwards. Excuse me for burping there, folks. But that does take us out.
Just one thing before we go. On Facebook yesterday, I saw a lovely post explaining how to make mushroom Wellington.
Yeah, that's what they're calling it now.
And this is for vegetarian folks, that you can make the whole thing out of mushrooms and other vegetables.
Oh, this is a sort of vegan version.
Yeah, it's a vegetarian beef Wellington. And I just thought, I'm not sure the timing on this is quite right.
Probably too soon. All right, that really does take us out as of now. We do have some comments from listeners, which I'm just gonna hold over for the next show, for our next show. So don't think that we're ignoring you. Please keep writing in. We do enjoy your letters. But that takes us out for this show on Halloween. Get out there and get yourself some chocolate, Jack. Just pull the Blacks t-shirt over your head. Walk around the streets. That'll be frightening enough.
And I'll walk down the hill and have a couple of beers. Thanks. Yeah.
All righty. Okay, well, enjoy that. And listeners, we'll be back next week. All the best. Cheers. Bye.